statements that I need to get off my chest.
If I may, Chair
Sure.
Mitchell, just one point, because we share so many concerns about possible unintended consequences. In terms of the sanction rate, it is actually approximately the same as it was in 2004, when the program was sort of in it, before it had been truncated, et cetera. And so that's not to say that's what it should be. I just want to make the point that it was, I think, 18.2 or 3% in 2004. It's now approximately 18.5%. I mean, it's almost dead level. The sanction rate was lower during the period of the young child exemptions, simply because a lot of people weren't required to do anything. And so that...
Per our direction. Let's always be clear about
our
that.
deal, right. No. I was then in the counties and pushing for it. So I just want to be clear that this is not an unusual sanction situation.
And so I guess that takes me back to the LAO's first point about currently available administrative data do not allow for conclusive findings in the outcomes of recent changes. I don't know if I'm measuring and looking at the right trend to determine success or not. I assume it's sanctions, maybe it isn't. And so the fact that we don't have the data to determine whether or not the actions we took as an elected body make sense on behalf of Californians is very troubling. We continue to just throw it against the wall and see what sticks, particularly in the context of the budget, where we all know it's not about policy that's in Michelle's best interest. It's about saving the broke state at that time. And so not having that data is troubling, because we don't know if the decisions we made are really in Michelle's best interest, short-term or long-term or not. So we have to figure that out. We can't continue to accept administrative policies, put forward policies of our own that don't have inherent in them a way to track success in a meaningful way. So we can hold you accountable, we can be held accountable ourselves, and we can begin to see a direct impact on the number of children who live in poverty, because that should be the ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. I do appreciate that. Let's go to the Vice Chair, please.
Yeah, thanks. And first of all, Michelle, fantastic job. How old are your kids?
My son's 13, my daughter Mackenzie is 11, and my youngest daughter Graciela is 6.
So when you first started through this adventure, how old were they?
12, 11, and 5.
Well, congratulations. You're a terrific role model, and you've showed a lot of strength and motivation coming here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I've got just maybe kind of a twofold question here. It's for Ryan. And let me finish this off, because we're assuming a few things here in this first question, but I want to quantify it. Ryan, according to the information we have from the Hoover Institute at Stanford University, who wasn't able to make it here today, California has the third highest maximum benefit levels of any state and one of the most generous time limit requirements in the entire nation. Now, can you give us a comparison about how generous California is compared to the other states, or is it because of our cost of living and everything else, is it just out of whack? I'd like your views on that. And the second question is, as we come out of this recession and people are going back to work, it seems to me that we should be, the welfare to work should be going down, but it seems to be going up. Could you make any of you make a comment on that?
Sure. Could I just ask, what was the quote again, that California is the highest cash grant?
The third highest.
The
Third highest maximum benefit levels.
maximum benefit levels, okay.
Add the housing.
So you're adding housing, childcare?
No, I'm just wondering, just as some,
Okay,
is that a fair
I-
comparison to other states,
Yeah.
or is it because the
wasn't
cost
sure.
of living and everything else, is it apples and oranges or what?
Sure. So to your first question, on the grant levels, you can get kind of different numbers depending on who does the asking and what year you're looking at. According to a telephone survey that the Department of Social Services conducted in late 2014, California's maximum grant level for a family of 3, for example, was around 7th among all states in the nation, not adjusting for cost of living or anything like that. We are about to have a grant increase in about 3 weeks which would put us to about fourth in the nation at that point, according to this survey. I will say that, as Mr. Haney mentioned, if you do adjust for cost of living, there's different ways to do that. You can look at fair market rents. It does put us right around into the middle of the pack. So I think that does need to be considered when thinking about comparing California to other states, is that housing costs, which is one of the primary things the grant is intended to pay for, are significantly higher than in many other states. With respect to other TANF policies, temporary assistance for needy families, as the federal program is called, with respect to time limits and sanctions, California is an exception among most states, and Director Lightbourne alluded to this. Almost all other states have sanction policies that, when the sanction ramps up over time to its maximum extent, do result in the discontinuation of all cash assistance for the family. That's not the case in California. And with respect to time limits, almost all states have time limits at the end of which all assistance for the family is discontinued. That's not the case in California. In California, assistance is discontinued. It's prorated down for the adult, while children can continue to receive assistance so long as they remain eligible. On your second question, with respect to the caseload, overall, the CalWORKS caseload is declining by about 2% every year. What we're seeing with the welfare to work caseload increasing, we think that's primarily a function of the phase out of these short-term exemptions. So while the overall caseload is going down, reflecting an improving economy and somewhat decreased need among California's families, we see increased participation in welfare to work because the requirement is now extended to a greater number of people.
Thank you. And Senator Hancock, the staff will continue that website if you want that information.
That's great. I just didn't quite catch it when you said it.
Okay,
but-
thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, we'll go to the Majority Leader here to
Thank you, Mr. Chair, co-chairs. I just need some clarification from Director Lightbourne. At the very end of your testimony, you made reference to a potential $600 million penalty that the state would owe the feds. Could you just walk me through what the criteria are, what's the basis for that?
Certainly, Leader Moaning. The states are required by the federal government to meet work participation rate standards. For a number of years, we met the standard in large part because we were allowed to apply a caseload reduction credit. And because, as Senator Mitchell mentioned, there had been a fairly steep decline from 97, that kept us above water. With the budget, the Deficit Reduction Act that the Congress passed in, I think, 2007, the caseload reduction credit was phased out, and instead states had to meet the 50% requirement of work participation rate, in a sense, absent that. For a variety of reasons, including the loss of the credit and perhaps some of the underlying economic activity and perhaps some climatological issues in California. California failed in 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011 to meet what was was not yet 50%, but it was an increasing target, and we were missing each time. The feds told us, and then for a while were silent. Then, starting about a year and a half ago, we started to get their letters saying we now have to impose the penalties that are provided in federal law. And our option was to appeal, either based on circumstances or whatever, which we did. We appealed each year. All of those appeals have now run and have been denied. And we were faced with either an immediate sort of loss of the $340 million or submission of a corrective action plan. The governor submitted a corrective action plan on behalf of the state last summer, and that requires us to hit the 50% in federal fiscal year 15, ending in September. So if we fail to meet it, then the 8, 9, 10 penalties are in effect. That's the $341 million. The 2011 penalty, because it's a growing amount based on 5% of the block grant, the 2011 penalty would be approximately another 240, call it, I think 241 million. That we got a deferral that we don't have to meet the standard until next year, but if we failed it 2 years in a row, then we would be $600 million. And they would essentially deduct it from the TANF block grant. We wouldn't get that money, and it would be a very big problem.
Thank you. So just so I'm clear, where, I know it's hard to predict, but what's our trajectory to meet this end of the current federal fiscal year, September 15th? What do we need to do to satisfy that?
If absolutely nothing changed right now, I mean, if we maintained everything, we would be at about 48.9%. We would miss. And part of what makes it possible for us to hit it at all is a policy that was entered into by the state in, I think, 2011, to create a sort of a program that lets us count working individuals receiving CalFresh benefits. We provide them a minimal TANF benefit, and we get to count them towards our WPR, including that we're at the 48 and change. To hit the 50, we're going to have to have, and we're working with some counties, who are very much our partners in this. I don't want it to sound like they're not pulling. I mean, they are pulling as hard as they can, and we're working with them to problem solve as much as we can.
Thank you. Well, that helps me understand the challenges and at least how it's calculated. On another subject, and for anyone on the panel, and I may have missed this, I apologize, I got here late, but I know that in relation to the federal poverty level, our payment as a percentage of that has gone down. Do we have data that shows any correlation to an increase in families becoming homeless because that relative market buying power doesn't allow them to maintain rental property? I guess the simple question, is there any index for homelessness as a trend for recipients?
So I don't have that for you right now, and I'm not sure whether it exists in truth, but we know that when you have large numbers of people or large percentages operating at deep poverty, you typically see homelessness levels go up and housing problems exacerbated. And so the grants operating at 42% of the federal poverty line, which is deep poverty levels, it's a fairly easy thing to surmise that that's a problem going forward, and in large part is why something like the housing support program that was started last year has been a dramatic early success.
Thank you. And I guess related to that, and maybe for follow-up, I don't know that it would be at your fingertips, but as a function of the need, Section 8 subsidies, and more importantly, Section 8 available housing, how does that availability correlate to need?
The data suggests California is low. I can't remember the exact number, but about 3 years ago, PPIC did an analytic survey, and the percentage of CalWORKS recipients who were benefiting from Section 8 assistance was in low teens, as I recall.
Great. Well, that's not good. It's helpful for us to, I think, add that to the mix in how we study the gravity of the problem in the real lives of families and what this is able to address and where it falls short in providing families minimal stability. So I'll stop there in the interest of time. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Senator. We'll go to Senator Hancock.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to underscore the housing comment, last year we had speakers from the Davis Institute for the Study of Poverty and also Stanford's Institute. They said that the cost of housing is the reason California has the highest poverty rate in the country. So I think from Senator Manning's comment, that is something we really need to look at. But I would just like to go back, because I had the same question as Senator Manning. What do we have to make good on? Why? Or do we lose $600 million? Now that we know we're talking about work participation rate, I have a couple of questions. If we're at 48.9 and we need to get over 50, wouldn't it make financial sense to invest in state subsidized employment of some kind? So that we could put a couple of percentage points of people back to work?
Yes, and that's certainly part of what we're hoping will get us over. As you know, we have approximately $130 million invested in subsidized employment in the CalWorks program. And as that becomes more robust, I think that's probably one of our best hopes.
I would think that it would be, and goodness knows, there's a huge need for support workers in so many fields, working with people, working with children. Thank you, Michelle, for nodding. You're our human, you're our touchstone in this. Doesn't make a difference to real people. But it was just something that occurred to me. $600 million is huge. 2% not meeting the goals is relatively small. The need in certain job categories is huge, and somehow we should be able to put it together. I also wondered, are there, I know we don't like to make comparisons, but are there some counties that drag the state down by being outliers in terms of their ability to be successful with welfare participants? And you might not have to answer, but I wonder if the LAO or the Budget Project would know this.
Let me take a shot. We work closely with counties and try to watch their trends. Some counties obviously are in very distressed labor markets. Central Valley. They've seen a reduction in number of people actually working, but they're making really strong efforts. A couple places you see a downturn and it doesn't track with the economy, and with them we're working most closely. And then some counties are absolutely, blow it away, stellar, 50, 40%, 60% participation, just tremendous.
Well, I think it would be interesting to evaluate how the counties are doing and making allowances for some places with more difficult labor markets. What are we learning about what works and what doesn't, or how do we identify the barriers? Are housing costs out of sight in the Bay Area? You think that would drive participation rates down? Is the job market weak in the Central Valley? That would drive participation rates down, because it helps us as people making budget and policy decisions here figure out also what we have to do to support these goals. And so one of the other things I wanted to know is how we define success. Working in the prison area a lot, took us 2 years to get a definition of recidivism. So what's success in CalWorks?
I don't want to use WPR as success. WPR is just escaping a bad consequence. Success has to be child well-being, and we haven't always seen eye to eye on this. I insist CalWorks is a child well-being program, in addition to being a welfare to work program. Colleagues have disagreed. Last year, we were trying to put together sort of enriched early education, parent engagement sorts of approaches. The feeling was that was a distraction from other stuff we were working on, so we should table it for the while. We haven't brought it back this year in the budget. It's not something that I want to forget about. I think it's urgent. And I think that the CalWorks program uniquely knows families in extreme distress who would benefit from certain services. So as we bring this stage of CalWorks system build to completion and move past it, those are the pieces that I see coming next. But of course, we'll do so very respectfully with our colleagues in the counties, with other stakeholders, of course, with the legislature.
Just out of curiosity, because I'm sure you've thought about this, we're defining recidivism right now as not being reconvicted of a crime for 3 years. Now, I don't know, is there something like the adult parent having a job that pays a living wage for 3 years?
Let me be honest. Currently, we can't track that because when most people leave aid, they leave. There's not much follow-up. as we work with the WIOA process, we're looking at what opportunities exist to do wage file matches across systems so we can see how it's going. We do know San Francisco, in their subsidized employment program, has done some very good studies that show retention and wage growth a few quarters out, but it's not longitudinal in terms of 3 or 4 years.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, has any organization done a calculation of how much federal money we leave on the table when we don't maximize the federal match by increasing our own contribution? Or how that, there should be cost-benefit analyses of where you would maximize
Actually,
your
we
return?
totally maxed out the TANF block grant. We were in a sense, state overmatch, where it's general fund above maintenance of effort requirement at this point.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Hancock, and for your work as well. Let's go to Senator Stone.
Thank you very much, and sorry I missed part of your testimony. One of the concerns I had when I was running for this office was the fact that in California we represent roughly 13% of the nation's population, and we have roughly 1/3 of the nation's welfare. And according to the most recent U.S. Census Bureau report on state government finances, California spends well above the national average on welfare. $80 billion in outlays for welfare, 34.3% of all general expenditures, which were $11 billion higher than the previous year and well over the national average of 30.8%. And so my question is, can you explain why we have one of the highest, if not the highest, welfare caseload and the highest poverty levels in the nation, despite the fact that we spend more helping the needy than any other state? What are we doing wrong?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think I would start in a slightly different order. One of the reasons we have a very high, comparatively, population receiving assistance is because of our high poverty. No one can get into the program that does not meet a income asset threshold that's extraordinarily low, to be frank. Secondly, the other point I was making is because California does not time limit children. We time limit adults, we don't time limit children. That was a conscious policy decision, frankly, based on the child well-being standard, to say we have got to provide a basic level of support to children. And Senator Mitchell recalls some years ago I testified in response to a proposal from the then administration about eliminating the child-only caseload, and was very, very firm against it, and I still am, even in this position. As long as we do that child wellness-based support, we will have a higher caseload than the rest of the country. In terms of the dollar amounts, I saw that from the SPR summary of that. All they can have been doing is rolling in all of health spending, all of developmental disability services, all of, IEP type school-related services, because to get to $80 billion on a $120 billion general fund, it's not there. So I think they rolled a lot of stuff into one category.
Okay, so the theme of this this hearing is welfare to work, and I certainly want to do everything that I can to help the underserved. And by the way, I'm in complete support of keeping the support for the kids, but I want to do what I can to help our adult population that find themselves in the unemployment realm for greater than 24 months. And it seems to me that if somebody is in the program longer than 24 months, that there should be some type of an augmented intervention by the state of California to figure out, okay, what is the reason why this person cannot get a job? Is it because they don't have the skill sets that are required today? Is it because those jobs are no longer here anymore that they're qualified for? But there's got to be a way to get to the end game here, that we want to facilitate and help these people get back to work. And by the way, Michelle, right? I want to tell you how much I enjoyed your story, and I applaud you for overcoming the many obstacles that you faced throughout your life. I wish you and your family Godspeed, and God bless you for being here, and thank you for your courage to come before us today. But I want to know what we can do as a state to quickly intervene after 24 months when it looks like we're not getting anywhere with these people that need our help, and get them gainfully employed in some manner. It just seems as though when we hear this in the community that we're creating a culture of welfare in the state of California. I think you would disagree with that assertion. And certainly we don't want to create a culture of welfare. We want to bring people out of welfare and become gainfully employed, and to one day hopefully buy a home and live the American dream here in this wonderful state. How can we, as a committee, effectuate more intervention in helping these people get on their feet?
Thank you, Senator. I wouldn't suggest what I'm about to offer is an exhaustive list. I'm sure other people have really good ideas. But among the things that we currently do, and that I think will strengthen as we move forward, first, in that second 2-year period, and this is a slight change from what Senator McGuire said in his opening, after the 24-month, it's not just unsubsidized employment that meets the participation requirements to remain on aid. There's a federally countable year of education, so if somebody's in a 2-year or 4-year program, that year can count. Additionally, subsidized employment counts. And since we have the subsidized employment resources and capacity, I hope that's one of the tools we'll use so that the person who just may not seem like a good enough, I hate to use the word, but let's use it for a moment, a good enough risk to the employer. If we risk share by saying, okay, part of the cost is on the CalWorks program, part of it you're bearing, but it's got to be with a good intention of hiring, and we'll look to what your patterns are as to whether we go on working with you. That, I think, is one of the very best resources we can bring to bear.
I know in the past couple of years, you increased the slots to more than 8,000 beneficiaries of this program. Have we been able to track them to find out how many of those slots have been ultimately filled?
They are ramping up very quickly. They're not going to use the full 8,000 slots, I don't think, in this fiscal year. They will in next.
They will.
Could you just say the program that you're referencing? The subsidized employment program?
The subsidized employment program, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And let's see here. And if they meet these requirements, if they stay in subsidized employment, how long do they remain on the program? In excess of 48 months?
No, they're limited to the 48-month for health assistance.
That's the
Right. Now, if they've been in sanction for some period of time, that may stop the 24-month clock, et cetera. But by and large, we should treat it as though everyone who reaches the 48-month is a hard stop.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. We're going to go back to Senator Hancock.
No, I just wondered, Mr. Lightbourne, were you talking about social bonding when you said that there was a program where you'd invest in some way in subsidized employment?
I'm sorry, no. What I was sort of trying to imply was that the way we viewed the subsidized employment program is the way to partner with employers to say, okay, in the first some period, 6 months, let's say, of this person's employment, we, the CalWorks program, will be bearing some or all of their salary cost. The expectation is you are committed to working with them long term, and we want to see these turn into careers, but recognizing that some people simply need the start. It's almost like on-the-job training that's paid.
Got it. Thank you. That sounds very interesting.
Thank you so much, Senator. Did you have a follow-up? Okay.
You wanted to have your last word? I have
Yes.
one question.
Oh, no,
Let me
please
do
go
mine.
ahead.
Let me do
Yeah,
mine
yeah,
for-
no, absolutely.
It just occurred to me as I sat here and listened to our collective desire to help people go to work. But I listened to you, Michelle, and my takeaway from your willingness to share your personal story was it wasn't just about you finding a job, But in order to do that, you needed a place to bathe your children. You needed a kitchen with a full range to prepare meals, a refrigerator to keep food. It's not just about you getting the job. All of those things needed to be in place because, as you talked about, it was the 5 days of childcare that allowed you to go out and look for a job. Is that fair for my